Well, I'm thinking about a #1 October hunting tip. You know, a lot of your bow hunting, your seasons are just kicking off or about to kick off. Some of our bow seasons have been in for a while. September 1st, the last date start. Ours started, it was about the third Saturday in September in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So right in that phase where October, you know, a lot of times, I'll admit, you know, when you're going out for that first time, it's kind of kicking the rust off. And even just becoming woods aware, meaning that you really want to blend in. And I find that I'm a lot better hunter and I blend in a lot more in mid-October, late October than I do in early October or September. For example, you hear that squirrel, the first thing you do is jerk your head. Well, if that was a buck and you did that later on, or a mature doe coming in, they're going to pick you out and run. So by the end of the season, it's a slow turn. You're looking with your eyes, searching with your eyes, and you're really trying to blend in later. October is that time where it's that intermediate time where you're looking at starting with acting like that and phasing in. And it's really a roller coaster of hunting, roller coaster of opportunity. And when it comes to really planning your sets and really capitalizing, making the most of it, I focus purely on the weather. And of course, you have to have that sign that's available. I can mention, and didn't write it on the board, that really trying to hunt the hot sign, the current sign. For example, right now, Tyler, he's our hunt winner for Camp Kicking Bear, the charity event. We're trying to focus on what pictures, what sign, what rubs, scrapes that are open right now. Even look at some pictures. There's a nice one. We call him 45, a really nice buck. He was in it September 1st on a plot we might go sit on, and we set up on the hermit plot where we have the oak trees, and I'm going to go out there and sit tonight with Jen. But we even have bucks like that were there 3 weeks ago or 3.5 weeks ago, but are they going to be there tonight? And so I'd rather hunt the hot sign, and I think that's what October is all about, because it's a time of change for the deer. And for especially bucks. You know, does and fawns are sitting at home. As long as they have food and cover, they'll just stay there. They'll stay there through August, September, October, November, December. A lot of times till you spook them out, till the food runs out, till the cover gets impacted. But bottom line is, this is a roller coaster of opportunity, meaning that not only do we have a roller coaster of the weather, which I hunt, but we have a roller coaster of sign, and mature bucks are starting to change. This is really a time of change. I talk about the whitetail shift, mid-September to mid-October, right smack dab in the middle of that. And you really need to hunt that current sign immediately. So it's all part of that roller coaster. Within that roller coaster though, and this starts for my entire season, and I've done this for over 30 years, I hunt the weather. And you know, going back, I talk about it all the time, going back to listening to AM weather. You had the marine forecast out of the thumb area of Michigan. This is back in the early to mid 90s. You'd literally listen to that on the way to the stand. Get in your car, listen to AM radio. And there were times I turned around because I planned on hunting a certain stand, and the Oakland Press, which was a newspaper that was pretty regional out of Oakland County, Michigan, it would say that this wind is going to happen or this weather, and you'd look at it. And then of course, the newspaper and the weather forecast back then, looking out 6 days and looking at that weather, didn't really translate into a lot of accuracy. So the marine weather forecast is what I rely on. You know, now it's so different. As far as planning your sits. But I've gone a long time with looking at, these are good conditions, meaning moderating conditions. Big fronts just came through, big drops in temperatures. I hunt the back side of the fronts. I don't necessarily look for calm winds, but I look for winds of change, where the winds have actually died down. Doesn't matter if it's from 50 to 30 mile an hour, or 30 to 20, or 30 to 10. It's died down. There's been a change, a noticeable change to the deer. And then also those clearing conditions where you don't have the high winds, obviously, but then rain, snow, thunder, lightning, whatever it might be. So I'm looking for the backside, and especially that cold, you know, looking at drops at 8 to 10 degrees or more. What that does is you just have to always look at absolutes. If someone tells you the weather doesn't matter, ask them, so you're saying a deer just goes out and feeds in a blizzard, just like normal? What about thunderstorms? Thunder and lightning, are they out in the open? Well, sometimes they do. They've even had recordings of deer being struck by lightning in a little herd out in the field. But generally, they're a lot smarter than that. The weather does dictate when they move. There's a lot of absolutes. And they might move the same distance from day to day. They just move more during the daylight. They're hungry. So when a big front comes through, they miss feedings. They feed 5 times in a 24-hour period. So if they're missing feedings based on stress, noise, limbs breaking in the woods, that's burning energy. If they're missing feedings because you have a big major front coming through and they're not going out at night and feeding in the big open hardwoods, or in someone's garden or ag field, somewhere where they can just sit there and consume and it's safe, it's social. But with big high winds, they're not feeding. And then third, if the temperature's dropping, they have to burn more energy to stay alive. So you're getting a triple threat right there of a lack of energy and a burning of energy. And that's why deer move. I mean, obviously, if they're missing feedings, like you or I, we're hungry the next time we get to eat. It's no different with deer. So they're going to move a little bit more. They're going to consume more. They're going to be on their feet more. That doesn't even mean that they move a greater distance overall. And that's why a lot of the studies, collar studies that show, well, the deer didn't move during this weather. Well, they moved the same amount as the day before, but they moved earlier. They stayed in locations longer and fed. They were on their feet more. And that means more opportunity for you. And so if you look at, boy, I could hunt Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. I have a choice between one of those nights. Just pick the best weather. We can help you with that with HuntCast through HuntWise. It's an algorithm, weather algorithm that I infused into HuntCast from 30 years of my own experience and finding success. That's how I've been able to shoot a lot of deer throughout the years and a lot of mature bucks, most of the 35, 40 target bucks throughout the years, because I wait for that great weather day and then everything else to come in shape too. And everything else. So that starts a roller coaster. That weather, bucks changing, looking for current sign. There's a lot of roller coaster of opportunity and different things that are happening. But weather-wise, that starts a roller coaster for me the entire year. I base my hunts on the weather. I follow that, and if you do too, you'll find success. But that leads us into, what do you do with that? You know, when do you hunt? October is a time of change all around. Weather, whitetails, movement patterns, bucks, their feeding patterns. So let's break it down into 3 times that we could look at for October the 1st, early season. You're still sometimes in those early season patterns. Chad Garteski, one of our neighbors, just a couple properties away, shot an absolute giant Jam 4. He had named Jam 4 because he sees them a lot during the summertime. We saw him last year. He was one of my hopefuls more mid-October, late October, because that's when we see him around mid-October through January. We have opportunities where he's on the property during daylight, but those opportunities are no more. Because Chad shot him a couple Sundays ago. He's just an absolute giant. But those are those bucks that are changing. And Chad caught him in that early season pattern. He's feeding on early season summer food sources. He's going to change, but Chad beat him to that change. And he was able to capitalize on it. So kudos to Chad. That was really cool that he was able to get that monster. But that's that early season pattern that some of you can capitalize on. After those bucks are out of that, and it happens quickly. It could be on the 2nd day, 3rd day. Think about all that hunting pressure that's applied, say in Michigan on October 1st. Look at all that pressure, Pennsylvania, Ohio, a lot of these big pressure states. There's a lot that happens in the deer woods after that change. So that early season, I'm focusing on food. Chad was focusing directly on food. Dylan knows of a monster that was shot last night, an absolute monster, one of the all-time greats that was shot last night. And I bet you it was some type of food source pattern, something going on where it was moving. But bucks don't move that much this time of year other than by food. So they might go back to a bedding area. You might get lucky where they're at. The bottom line is the most movement they're going to make is the afternoon towards food, evening towards food. And we watch the weather for that. But really look at those early season patterns in food and capitalize on it. But then after that, you have what's called the lull. You know, that time of period in mid-October. A lot of people call it the October lull, but it also happens in September because the lull is a direct result of a lot of a hunting pressure that's been applied. So the deer seem like they're going nocturnal, but when really they've just been spooked. Acorns are dropping. People say, well, they change their patterns. Not really. They might focus over here, feed on some acorns on the way to their afternoon, evening food source, but they're really not changing their patterns overall. If they're not coming out and hitting those green food sources, those food plots that you'd planned on and watched and hoped for an encounter on, most of the time it's because it's been pressured. Because think about that. The more they eat acorns during the day, the more they eat dried corn during the day, the more they eat hardwood regeneration, browse. This is all tough stuff to digest. In fact, fawns, when they're young, they need some type of green herbaceous growth because they have a really hard time digesting just woody browse. It's hard. It's hard on their system. So they love to hit some green, wash it all down. That's why we focus on green as a base for all food plots and not some type of grain like corn or soybeans. Because if you have that green, that next step is that grain, like adding corn, so that you can actually give them that energy and those carbs that they want when it gets colder. But it's a good transition. You have to have that green base, and they'll hit that. So I'm focusing on green. You see an October lull, you can lull-proof your land by really focusing, or your hunt by focusing on green or planting green. So if you're on public land, really look for those green food sources. Someone asked me, what's a green food source on public land? There's a lot of greenbrier down in a lot of those areas in Ohio, public land, West Virginia. They have good shoots, leaves, green leaves, maple leaves. Swamp edges, there's a lot of birdsfoot trefoil up north next to swamps. So where you have swamp meaning hardwood, you have a lot of green herbaceous growth that'll linger in through that October time. So even on public land, you can find a green food source. You can find some type of green that's aside from just acorns and hardwood regeneration. There's got to be something better out there, just looking for diversity. The more stems per acre, you'll find more green. The thicker it is, you'll find more green. So look for that transition between the two. The bottom line is you can find it, and if you don't overpressure it, then you're going to lull-proof your land, and you're going to have a great hunt in that mid-October range. But then, and I'm focused on evening hunting again. So they're not into those food sources in the morning, and if they are, you go into a stand nearby and you just spook them. A lot of lands are destroyed because people are really antsy to get out there, and they're over anxious, and they go hit a blind or a stand right along a food source in the morning, and that's done for a couple weeks. If you had a mature buck in a pattern, you spook him in the morning going in, he's not coming back. And he's changing. He might shift and he's gone a mile away. They usually shift about a mile, mile and a half. So I'm focusing in the early season on food, the lull in food, but then big things happen. And that's when you get in the pre-rut. Now that pre-rut in Missouri, West Virginia, Oklahoma, that line, Tennessee, Kentucky, that pre-rut might take place more the end of October, 1st of November. But up north here, you're looking at the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, northern Pennsylvania, New York. You're looking at more the 22nd, 25th of October. Now, when I say like the pre-rut, that doesn't mean necessarily there's a lot of does coming into heat. There might be trickle. There might be one here or there. But those mature bucks are ready. They're ready for the rut to begin. But think about it. They exert a lot of energy going out and making a bunch of rubs and scrapes, and even if they're just moving within their same 5 acres that they like to bed in during the day, they're just moving more, but they never really leave that location. They don't want to do that when it's 90 degrees in Indiana or 95 degrees in Kentucky, West Virginia, whatever it might be, Missouri. They want to do that when there's a cold front and there's a pattern. It's interesting. We see bucks in the pre-rut and rut really gravitate towards water, but they don't do when it's hot. Not that they don't, but we don't see that jump in activity at a water hole when it's really hot. We see it when it's cool at the end of October, and that signifies that the pre-rut's about to begin, and it's about to happen. So it's really cool to see that transition take place. They're moving a lot more. It's colder, but they're moving a lot more. I always give the story about when we were playing hockey on the ice back when we were teenagers. It's 10 degrees out. And my friend's mom comes out and says, "What are you guys doing? None of you have your coats on. We're sweating through our t-shirts. It's 10 degrees, so we're playing hockey. We're all worked up. We're having fun. And we're thirsty. You drink a lot of water when that happens, even though it's 10 degrees out." Same with deer. When they're moving a lot, exert energy, they get thirsty. That's when you know the pre-rut comes up. So really focusing on those cool days, that's when they're going to lay down a lot of rubs and scrapes. And then when it gets in the breeding season, when they're actually being bred, you know, the ramp up around here will be towards the end of October. Then if it's warm, they're still breeding does. They're doing just more at night. And there's a lot of activity that shows that, where warm weather, they still breed. Does are getting bred, they just do a lot more at night. Real windy weather, stormy weather, they might do a lot more at night if it calms down. You just won't see as much. And so that's what really begins that roller coaster, where you're focused on those weather patterns, especially when you get in the pre-rut. If you're in the pre-rut and you have a nice buck you're waiting on, he lives 1.5 miles away, and you need the rut to bring him over to you, and it's an 85-degree day, it's not going to happen, folks. That buck I call a non-core buck, and you need good weather to bring him over. If there's high winds, heat, he's not going to travel 1.5 miles over to you. That's why you wait on those bucks during the peak of the rut, you know, a week, 10 days later. And so that pre-rut, you're waiting for those cold days. You're waiting on a buck that has current sign. He's there. You know he's there. It's pre-rut time. He's going to be moving a lot more. Great time to capitalize on. That's where half of all my oldest and most mature bucks have come from, is that pre-rut time where you have those local core bucks that are core to your land, in and around your land. Doesn't mean that they're there all the time. They're just not routinely showing up at 2 to 4 in the morning. They're around shooting hours somewhere. And that's a great time to capitalize on those movements. It's not that I don't hunt food in the evening, but I place a huge priority on that morning hunt. And that morning hunt, that's when I start focusing. I don't anticipate right now hunting a morning until that time. I usually don't, unless I know there's some certain pattern of a certain particular target buck. We have a plot out here, the Hermit plot, and 7-4, a buck we're waiting on. He would come through there in the morning sometimes, coming out of the ag fields, filtering through the corn, going through the food plot, and we get a picture of him. Jam 4 was in that same pattern, although he's not going to be this year. But 7-4 would come through there. And if I saw 7-4 in that same pattern right now, you can bet he's coming through at 7:30, half hour after daylight. You can bet I'd get in there on him. But most of the time we don't see those patterns because they're already out in the woods, they're already out in their bedding areas in the morning. So I'm not focusing on morning hunts about 95% of the time until we get into this pre-rut time. Then there's a lot of good studies that show that bucks will move 3 times more during the daylight morning hours than they will the afternoon. So it's not to say you don't capitalize in the afternoon, but I like to hunt that morning time up till noon, 1. When the coast is clear, I get out of there, and then I'll flip around, and I'm really waiting on that last hour of daylight to see if there's a mature buck moving around a little bit more during pre-rut time at that time period. So really a different kind of focus. Not to say there's not evening or afternoon opportunity, but to me there's 3 or 4 times more in the morning on an unsuspecting buck over morning stands on the backside of bedding or between bedding areas that haven't been hit all year. For hunting, you probably haven't even been there for 3 or 4 months even to clear the standouts. It's always cool going into that first or second morning hunt in a random stand somewhere. Great opportunity. Look at October as light jabs. Unfortunately, there's people that don't, well, they might have, that's all they have time for, but they'll wait until that end of October, November to hunt. Even November, the November rut, but there's so much opportunity that can be had during October. Don't miss out. Don't miss out on those cold fronts during the lull, during the early season patterns, then times where other people are spooking them in mid-October. Great time to hit good quality food sources in the afternoon that have been unpressured. And then, of course, the pre-rut. But really look at it as you're taking light, calculated jabs. And I'm not saying you're going all in and spooking them out during the rut. What I'm saying is you're paying very good attention to exactly when to go in. You're hunting very smart. You're taking light jabs at the deer. You can go in and hunt this stand, get out without spooking them. Go over here, hunt this spot. Go over to a different land, hunt over here. You're just taking those light jabs. A lot of times those light jabs land a knockout and you end up shooting a really nice buck in October, especially when it gets into that pre-rut time. And, you know, we're end of September right now. We're hoping to have a couple good opportunities tonight, and we'll see. But again, we're just taking light jabs. We're going to hunt 2 stands tonight. We haven't sat, of course, this year. We haven't sat a lot overall. So October is a wonderful time. I hope you're taking advantage of it. I hope you can break down October like this. I hope you have a little flexibility in when you can take off. I know a lot of people can only hunt on weekends, but sometimes you're taking a Friday off or a Monday. You can slant it towards the best weather. Maybe you can get out on a Wednesday afternoon hunt. I know a lot of people are done working at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The time hasn't changed yet. So there's a lot of opportunity to hunt out in the evening, either early season patterns, the lull, maybe in a pre-rut time if you can get out and that's your only opportunity in that afternoon. So take advantage of October. It's a great month. I love hearing about it in the comments below and the success that you guys have. And I appreciate you watching. I really want to mention too, we have our rut web class that I started offering last year. It'll help guide you through all phases of the rut, where to hunt, when to hunt, why it's the pre-rut versus the rut lockdown versus the peak versus the post versus the second rut, and how you should really navigate your entire rut. It's probably the most complete and detailed approach to hunting the rut that you can find online. Hope you guys can take advantage of that. I urge you to check it out. There's a link in the description. And appreciate you guys watching all the way to the end of this video. I urge everyone out there to really check out my web classes. They've been wildly successful. We have one that details how you should design your land, another one that details how you should plant and maintain and manage a food plot program. How can you make those decisions that fit your land specifically and not someone else's? Unfortunately, there's so much information in the hunting industry that says you should do this, but it doesn't apply to you. These web classes directly apply to you. And then we have our 3rd web class that came out last year, our rut web class, navigating the entire rut. And then we have our 4th one coming out, which is hunting hills and thermals. I urge you to check those out, try the web classes, and they're all about teaching, helping you understand how you can navigate, not only managing your property, food plots, and the rut, but also hunting strategically, hills, thermals, and wherever you pursue whitetails for your dream and your passion.